If there's one thing we can all agree on, it's that humans will believe almost anything. On Blasphemy with Chris and Marnee, we take a look at some of these beliefs, uncover their very human origins, how they've developed and changed over time, and the very real consequences they had in society and culture. Impacts that continue even today in our lives. Welcome to Blasphemy. My name is Chris Setti, and coming to you from Spokane, Washington on a, is it Saturday?
It's Saturday morning.
Saturday, sunny morning. Mm-hmm. And sitting here with me is the beautiful Marnee. How you doing, Marnee?
I'm good.
All right. So we're a little late on this one. We've had it's busy times at the house here.
It's at the house in the world.
Yeah. But and also just as an announcement, we're kind of changing formats. So we've been doing weekly episodes. That's really hard, by the way. I have to read a lot. I have to do a lot of things, and I'm also trying to do other things that actually make me money instead of cost me money. And so we're going to switch to doing episodes every other week. But that will give me more time to really dig into things. And
but we're even late on this week, aren't we?
We are, but
this is our week, but we're late on it. So.
Right, that just happens. Luckily, we have a lot of really long episodes up there, so if you haven't listened to them all, there's plenty of stuff
to listen to.
Yeah. So
that's what we're being helpful.
That's
we're just giving you space.
Exactly.
To listen and catch up.
It's about you,
it's
not
all about you.
Our need to not freak out. Also, you can find us at blasphemypodcast.com, and wherever you find your podcast, you can find us on there. Subscribe, rate, review, do all that stuff. That would be super cool of you. And that's it. I don't have anything else anymore, I don't think. Mm-hmm. Cool. Okay, so last episode, we examined the history of our fight against disease and the world-changing medical breakthroughs that happened in the latter part of the 18th century that quite literally saved millions upon millions of lives and absolutely, completely, and totally created the world we live in today with all of its safety, hopes, and dreams of a bright future for our children, right? So if you didn't listen to last episode, go listen to it. It's a really good story of something that happened that, while we don't think of it, and it's kind of just a normal part of our lives now, the thing that entered the human experience in the late 18th century, it changed everything, right?
And I learned things.
Yeah, me too. So in part 2, we're going to take a look at the other side of that coin. Like today, there were people who saw this progress as bad, evil even. And while we might think it took some time for them to get riled up, maybe due to evidence or situations that raised concerns over the new science, it didn't happen that way at all. In fact, these moral crusaders and self-appointed experts began their uninformed and knee-jerk campaigns pretty much immediately upon the spread of variolation throughout Europe, Britain, and America. Okay, so it's not like after some time, people started seeing, hey, there's weird stuff happening, here. And I don't know, maybe we need to step back and look at this more, with a different perspective. No. It was immediate.
They were like, you got anything? No.
Yeah. They're like,
no.
I don't know what you're doing, but it scares me, and so I'm, that's it. That's how it was.
No.
Oh, man. I don't know your fancy science talk, so it must be from the devil. Kind of like that. First, though, I wanted to take you through what happened in the wake of Jenner's introduction of vaccination as a safer, more effective means of smallpox immunization. I wanted to look first, what happened then? So we saw, he kind of proved the science.
Yeah.
And like we saw, it culminated in that, what is his name? James Phipps, a little 8-year-old boy that he inoculated with cowpox. Mm-hmm. And then, remember, he shot him up with live smallpox later to test that theory, right? Which sounds really harsh. But, when Jenner died, he left that little kid a fucking house. He did.
Really?
Yeah, as saying, for your contribution to humanity, you are a hero. And so he left him a cottage, when he died. So it wasn't like he went go back to the slums,
right.
James, The procedure spread quickly across Britain and Europe, causing smallpox to recede and decline, sometimes to a level where years would go by and it almost became a memory. That is, until some little brat whose mom decided she should listen to the local preacher declaring the ungodliness of vaccination set off another outbreak, killing people who no longer needed to die. But we will get to all that in a little bit. Just talking about that, too, like we're in the midst. This is great because we're in the midst of this. Full disclosure, Marnee and I got our first shot of the vaccination. We're still alive, too. I haven't turned in anything weird. My DNA hasn't seemed to change yet.
It's going to take years, babe.
It's going to take years before I turn into a mutant. God, I hope that happens.
Yeah. He doesn't think it's changed, but I'm watching.
No, we're fine. Everything's fine. But there's a lot of talk about the vaccination. There's a lot of stuff going around and people concerned about it. And we're going to see... It was no different back then. And the things that we're saying now are fucking no different than they were back then. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to talk first before we get into kind of the anti-vax, reaction and what was going on with that. I wanted to talk about, okay, but what were the effects of vaccination? How did it spread? Like how did it lead to this point where smallpox is not even a thing that we even it's a history book chapter, right? It's not it's not a part of our lives. It never has been. And hasn't been for a while.
Yeah.
And so, they began spreading vaccination, obviously throughout Britain, where it was kind of proven, and then throughout Europe as Britain took it over there. And it had a huge effect to where there were times where smallpox kind of became a thing of the past. It seemed like, oh, we're finally over this.
Yeah.
But the thing about infectious diseases is that you got to get everyone on board with stamping this thing out, because what would happen is, people would be like, oh, I guess I don't need to do this because smallpox isn't around, the next thing, right? Here in fucking Spokane a few years ago, remember there was like a fucking whooping cough outbreak, right? Pertussis, which is something that we controlled through vaccination. But then people started going like, why should I give my baby dangerous chemicals because whooping cough's not around anymore? And then their kid fucking ends up with it. And they had to close schools here a few years ago. It was like wildfire. There have been fucking mumps outbreaks and shit that our grandparents grew up with.
Yeah.
And it's happening in little Sienna and fucking whatever you name your kid. I don't know what you name your kids now, but it's happening in all the hipster babies too. And it shouldn't.
Yeah.
And it comes from a lot of this misinformation. And so I wanted to first look at this is what happens when vaccination spreads, though. And it's awesome. Some of these stories are really awesome.
Are you dissing hipsters?
No.
Okay.
No,
well,
I'm
you said
part hipster.
You kind of blamed the hipsters for
but
outbreaks.
Okay, that's a generalized term. A lot of young parents today are very concerned about everything. And so you know what I mean? Like when it comes to your kid, it's like, oh, should I let them eat white bread? I'm like, fuck you. Do you know how much white bread I consumed from the time of my birth till I was 18? Fucking factories of Wonder Bread worth of Wonder Bread. And we're living,
I just didn't want one group to be single.
No, I'm not. And I'm not saying they're bad for being concerned. I'm saying they're bad for being like way too concerned.
I was just namely just hipsters.
It could be anyone. There's hippie kids out there. There's fucking right wing crazy conspiracy parent kids.
All of them, not just that one group.
I was making fun of the names, and so they're typically the ones that name their kids' names like that. Anyway, okay, so Jenner did not see vaccination as something to sell or use as a profit generator. He wanted the whole world to have it for free for the good of all humankind. We need more of these kinds of motherfuckers today, right? He's like, no, this isn't about a business. I did this to save the fucking world.
Yeah.
And yeah. Of course, for every Jenner, there's 10,000 people waiting to bleed people dry for medicine. In line with Jenner's vision of global vaccination, in 1803, the world's first mass vaccination program set sail from Spain, right? 1803. While cases were steadily declining in mainland Europe, because of vaccination, by the way, and only because of vaccination, right? Remember, even with inoculation, it kind of gave individuals a chance at protection
surviving,
and stuff.
But it didn't stop the spread.
Because you're giving them smallpox. And so while we came up with quarantine procedures and things like that, it still was very difficult because it was giving them a disease that then they could easily... It would be like if we decided to vaccinate people by giving them coronavirus. Notice we don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
We learned our lesson.
Yeah.
We did that with the polio. Now it's called the IPV, the inactive polio vaccine. It used to be active, right? And so we've learned through all these things, and vaccination was the first step in learning that. Was like, there's a safer way. There's a better way to build immunity to get the response we want in the body, but not have the body go through what it has,
really
to go through smallpox to get it like it naturally would have to do. And so, cases all over Europe and Britain were declining because this was spreading. People were adopting it. Local governments and nobility and all these people were adopting it. And so, by and large, people were lining up to be vaccinated because they wanted to live and they want their kids to live, right? So while that's going on in Europe, though, the colonies in Spanish America and Asia were being ravaged by brutal outbreaks of smallpox. They're way the fuck over there. They're not here where, we're taking stuff off of cows or off of people with sores from cowpox. They're fucking on the other end of the world and they're just being wiped out, right? This wasn't just a humanitarian disaster. It was also a political one for King Charles IV, who ruled Spain at this time. This, like, if you think about it, he's the king of Spain, and these are all their Spanish colonies spread throughout Asia and the New World, in America. And while things are going pretty well over there, out in the colonies, they're just getting fucked. They're not getting any relief, and so tax revenue dries up. They're not sending taxes anymore. They're trying to fucking make it. They're having all kinds of issues beyond smallpox too. So there's like a, he's in a political situation. His beloved daughter, Princess, this is the King Charles. They called him Carlos, of course. We call him Charles because we're all from Britain. He was King Carlos to they spoke Spanish, so Carlos. So his beloved daughter, Princess Maria Theresa, had been racked and destroyed to death by smallpox. Upon Jenner's introduction of vaccination, the king saw an opportunity to do some good and also gain some favor and regain tax revenue back from the colonies, right? It was like win-win. He summoned his court physician, Dr. Francisco Javier de Balmas, and told him his bold idea. They were going to figure out how to vaccinate millions and millions of people over, for the most part, the entire globe, right? So they're over here in Spain.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, here's what we're going to do.
What year is this?
1803.
Okay.
They're like, the king's like, we're gonna save these people, and we're gonna do something here, and this is a big plan. And so he calls his doctor and he says, this is the deal. We're gonna vaccinate everyone that we can.
Vaccinate the world.
Kind of like that. Spanish colonies, of course. Not
we're gonna vaccinate our
certain
world.
Parts of the world that owe me money. Fuck those other ones.
Keep those people alive so their money keeps coming
and they
in.
actually didn't have that attitude. You'll find out a little bit, but yeah, he was like, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this. This is a huge thing in 1803. It's not like, load them up on planes, guys, and get all our fucking thousands of volunteers. That wasn't what was going on. It was like, how are we going to do this? So you might think, get in a goddamn ship and go. Easy, right? Just take vaccination. They go over there all the time. Trade routes, political things, all kinds of stuff. But we need to understand that they weren't carrying syringes of vaccine like the UN on humanitarian missions today. Yeah. Right? Vaccination required live cowpox in order to perform the inoculations.
So they had to create it over there in...
Okay, listen. Cowpox was a disease that only occurred on English cows.
Oh.
And only particular kinds of them.
They had to ship English cows.
Yeah, but that wasn't practical, right? So how the fuck were they going to take vaccine across the fucking world over a period of years? Okay. So there were issues with the cows. Now, they eventually figured out how to do that. I mean, obviously, they eventually figured out all kinds of stuff to do this
What did
better.
they figure out?
Oh, I'm going to tell you.
Well, hurry up.
Okay. Dr. Balmas came up with a brilliant and slightly controversial plan. He had worked out a way to ensure that they had cowpox material once they got to their first landfall. What he planned to do was recruit 22 people, children is what he means, to come along with him as vaccine incubators.
Oh, geez.
Cowpox was a very mild disease. This was not like variolation with its chances of developing a fatal case of smallpox or infecting the unprotected around you. So it wasn't like he was risking people's lives. Yeah. I mean, beyond a transoceanic years-long voyage, which was probably the most dangerous thing about the trip.
Took years to get across the ocean?
Fuck yeah, dude. From Spain to Mexico?
Years or months?
Well, I mean, this is a years-long voyage. It's going to take 3 years for them to do this.
It takes 3 years to get across.
No, but the voyage takes 3 years, and they're on the ocean most of the time.
What?
It's a 3-year...
That made no sense what you said.
Listen to me. This trip is going to last 3 years. Okay.
It takes 3 years to get across the ocean.
That is not what I said. I said
they were on the ocean for 3 years.
Mostly. With only getting off to vaccinate people along the way.
Oh, you mean... Okay, see... I thought they were going from point A to point B.
Well, they're going
across the ocean.
They're going all over.
And it took no. They're taking stops at ports.
I know, but yes,
that's not what you were. That's not what I was understanding. I was understanding is they were going. Their first stop was 3 years later.
No. But they're going to be on this sailing voyage for 3 years.
Yes, I get that.
And just my point is that was dangerous too. The smallpox was. I mean, the cowpox was the least of the
world
concerns,
by
right?
ship. Okay,
but you can imagine a bunch of parents going like, "No, you're not taking my kid across."
Well, they probably went to the orphanages.
No, would you stop it? Just hold on a second.
Well, come on, it's obvious.
Cowpox was easily transmissible from one human to another through the small number of pustules that form. However, it is so mild that the human immune system quickly destroys any valuable infectious material. It's a very quick thing. Mm-hmm. Our bodies quickly mount a defense, and so there's really a short window of time. So you can't have just one. That's why 22. He kind of worked it out, on the trip. Like how many, you'll see his plan in a minute, but he kind of had worked out how long the trip was going to take to his first landfall and how many kids he would need to pass this thing from kid to kid, right?
Oh my
so they could keep collecting it, infecting, kind of thing, and move it on like a chain. And on the other end, they'd fucking have it. It's kind of genius.
And these kids got rewarded how?
I doubt they got rewarded. We'll talk about that. I mean, it's not like anything bad happened to it. I mean, we'll in their context of this time, they were fine.
Yeah.
To deal with these realities, his plan was to vaccinate 2 of them, harvesting the cowpox from their sores over the next 10 days or so. He would then continue taking the infection from one pair to another every 2 weeks or so, which would allow them to carry the vaccine across the first part of the journey. So he'd vaccinate 2 of them with cowpox, and then once the blisters form, he'd take some more and vaccinate them. Get it all the way over there.
When he would vaccinate them, and they would get the cowpox.
Yeah, because remember, vaccination is just being inoculated with cowpox instead of smallpox.
Oh, so it was less, but they still. Got
way less virulent.
So they were vaccinated with cowpox. They got cowpox, but it was much less severe than smallpox, and then they were now they're inoculated against smallpox too.
Exactly.
So
you build up defenses the same as you would against smallpox because of the similarity of the viruses. And even though it just happened to be similarities that obviously didn't have to do with its like effectiveness, as a disease, because cowpox was really mild and we filed off real easy with smallpox. But just like coronavirus, right? That spiked protein is how we do it. This innocuous thing, it's just the part that attaches to stuff, which is crucial. But I mean, it's like, it's not the killer part of the disease, obviously. It's the same thing with smallpox and cowpox. There was something similar our body could identify it with. Yeah. So pretty good plan, right? However, nobody, and I mean nobody, signed their kids up for this offer. He had to come up with a different strategy, and so he turned to the local orphanage, like you said, that place where there are no parents to tell him no. He walked into the Casa de Expositos in Coruna, Spain, and found 22 volunteers to be his vaccine carriers. I mean, he recruited 22 boys, is what it said in the history books. Recruited is a nice word for those 22.
Well, I mean, possibly they thought that would be an adventure.
Hey, man, if I was
something different than the orphanage.
We're going to find out. They were all between the ages of 8 and 10. You catch me, a 9-year-old boy, like what?
Yeah.
Like a
Going
pirate?
on a ship?
Fuck yeah.
A pirate. I'm going.
I'm fine. He did also take the person in charge of the orphanage, Isabel Zendal Gomez, to look after the boys who were all from age 8 to 10.
Oh,
Okay?
that's good.
So he brought her. Probably a smart move. Let's not have a bunch of young boys on a ship with a bunch of fucking who knows men. You know, it's not like they're doing background checks on these motherfuckers. Yeah. So they brought, I think they called her the rectoress, like a rector, but the female version for the orphanage. So she's going along with them. So I'm glad for that detail. I think that. Unless she was a total raving sadist, which could be. I don't know. We're saying, assuming she's a woman.
We're like,
she's nice. She's a woman, right?
Right? Nope.
On November 30th, 1803, Balmus, along with a deputy surgeon, 2 assistant surgeons, 2 people trained in first aid, 3 nurses, and the aforementioned 22 orphan boys plus their guardian Isabel, left on their mission aboard a Spanish corvette. That's one of their fast sailing vessels called the Maria Pita, which I was like, okay, I want to find out what that means, because I'm like, is this like,
what does PETA mean?
You saw the Virgin Mary on like flatbread or something?
What does PETA mean?
Well, see, that's what I thought. I was like, it means something. So I go looking and I'm like, what the fuck? And then I finally stumble across, it's like a historical thing. So check this out. This is a great story. Just trying to figure out what Maria Pita made. I came across this story.
Okay.
So like back in the 16th century, the English and Spanish been at war a few dozen times, right? And so they're at war again. And there's England is attacking this town of Coruna where they're setting sail from, right? Spain. And the ships have landed and the forces are on the land or whatever. And she's standing there with her husband, who's a soldier. And in the, arrows and spears and shit coming, he gets killed. And she gets so fucking pissed off. Her name's Maria Pita. The next guy that comes over the wall, he has like a spear with a banner on it. And she snatches it from him, fucking stabs his ass and kills him, and then pulls it out of him and is just like ready to kill whoever's next. And so she's like, okay, I'm going down dying, but I'm going to get another one of these English bastards. And all of a sudden the men just start retreating and they all go away. They all run away. And they're like, what the fuck? Well, it turns out, unbeknownst to her, the dude she killed was the admiral's brother. Of the whole fucking English Navy.
Yeah.
And they all didn't know what to do because this woman just straight up fucking no problem just destroyed the admiral's brother, their leader in this assault that they all just said, we don't know what to do. And they all left and went home. So she's celebrated as a hero in Coruna. There's been a bunch of ships named after her. And this particular ship was named after
so Pita is
Maria
just
Pita.
her name.
That's just her name. Yeah. I was like, what the fuck? Pita. But yeah, Maria Pita. So she's a badass.
Yeah.
So over the next 3 years, the expedition would bring this miraculous new defense against the scourge of smallpox to the Canary Islands, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Mexico, the Philippines, and China. Like fucking all over the place, right? By the way, when they got to New Spain, that's central southern Mexico today, they dumped the 22 boys and Isabel off at another orphanage to be raised by the church there, picking up more orphan recruits to maintain the vaccine across the Pacific to the Philippines. So they're now...
They're like, we got 22 to get this far. We'll replenish our supplies of orphans in Mexico and carry on.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, we're Mexicans now. And they live in Mexico. And then they picked up 22 Spanish or Mexican orphans who are at this orphanage and used them on their way over to the Philippines. And then I guess they became Filipinos, like not ethnically, but nationally, because they left them there.
Stay with them, or did they?
Yeah, she stayed.
She was the one that. Okay.
They left her too.
No. Oh, she stayed in Mexico.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The boys and her.
Interesting.
They left and I don't know. Maybe she's like, oh, I'll stay here.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know anything about her. I didn't look into her that much.
Just
in reading a book about this, her name was mentioned.
Well, that would make me think that she's not a terrible person.
No, she probably was not.
Gave her life to take care of these boys.
She, if she didn't care about these boys, she wouldn't have gone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. They didn't just bring vaccine, however. They had supplied the ship with medical instruments, which they delivered to the colonies. When they arrived, they held trainings for local physicians and health workers, educated them on the science and how to explain it to the local populace. They recruited political figures and influential community members to get them on board with the science so they could in turn convince the people to be vaccinated. They even held public vaccinations so the whole thing was transparent and people could see it is safe. It was, in a lot of ways, no different than what the WHO does today, and they did it 300 years ago. Pretty wild. So, like 280, whatever, years ago. But this is amazing because we do the same things now.
Yeah.
Notice, who do we have on TV being vaccinated right now? People that are influential. People that will reach populations and communities that are hesitant.
Yeah.
Whether it be African American communities, and so they'll have like doctors who happen to also be African Americans saying, hey, I understand we have every right, and they do have every right to be
suspicious. Yeah.
And they're saying, but this isn't that case. And so this is what they were doing too. Finding people that people listened to, that they would trust, that had a voice that was, that would have a positive impact. Not only that, they're going around, they're training people, they're showing them how to do this, how to, and so they're leaving this legacy. And then so vaccinations continue. Clinics are set up.
Yeah.
They're reaching out into far reaching populations and places like that. Right. Whether it be because they land in Mexico and walk across fucking Mexico. And then a team splits off, goes down into Peru and Argentina, all these Spanish colonies in South America, while the ship they pick up a ship on the other side of Mexico, go down and get them. And then they fucking go across to they're like hitting a lot of people. This is a pretty amazing thing, actually. And it's saving whole regions, whole countries, you know, at this point. In history, this is now known as the Balmas Expedition, after the doctor who became the first global vaccine ambassador who distributed freedom from smallpox around the world to suffering people. He even stopped off at an island in the South Atlantic that belonged to Britain at the time, offering the vaccine to the British authorities there, even though Spain and Great Britain were in the middle of the Anglo-Spanish War at the time. They were at war with England right now. And Balmas told them, no, we're stopping here. They're like, well, that's British. We don't give a fuck about them. We're at war with them. And he's like, doesn't matter. We're distributing vaccines. That's what the king wanted. And so we're stopping. And so they stop and they dropped off vaccine to their enemies who they are actively at war. I mean, not only is that a risky thing to even fucking approach them, but that just kind of shows that their intent was really to, this miraculous thing needs to be in the hands of people, of humans, right? The results from Jenner's breakthrough cannot be denied. Smallpox was dealt a huge blow as more and more people accepted this new scientific practice. In fact, in Jenner's lifetime, just prior to his death, he was given word of an announcement out of Lombardy in northern Italy. Through the use of his vaccination, they were able to confidently state they had eradicated smallpox from the region. This was an absolutely unthinkable possibility before vaccines. Jenner died happy knowing he had made a huge difference. It was right before his death. These people hurried this message to him to say, like, what you did was totally, like, wipe out in this area. And they're like, that just wouldn't have ever happened. Even with this, and just to put a punctuation on how fucking terrifying and persistent this plague was, it took a while for us to really claim any real victories. And even when we did, it was short-lived and narrow in scope. In the 1770s, we treated smallpox through a range of wacky antics. Leeches were used. People were bled and purged. Doctors thought draining the pustules would get it out of you. However, they just created more viral material to infect more people. They even thought that the color red had some strange power over smallpox. This is in the 1770s, right?
Yeah.
One time, an Austrian emperor had come down with smallpox and was getting worse and worse. His advisors sent an emissary to England to fetch some heavy red flannel, thinking that would be the key to his recovery. When it arrived, they hurried to the king, wrapped him up tight in the thick, hot fabric, and within minutes, he dropped dead on the floor. So red doesn't seem to have worked for some reason. They really thought that red had some weird thing. Even shows up in their art and stuff. It's fucking weird.
Yeah.
During this time period, the mortality rate with these treatments was up to 50%. Okay? Half. If you go to the doctor, you got to flip a coin. That's what's happening. Check this out, though. 200 years later, in the 1970s, when our fight with smallpox was coming to an actual final day of victory, we still had to treat the last unfortunate victims of this ancient enemy. Over a couple of centuries, we had developed antiviral drugs, come up with intensive care units designed to provide the best chance for recovery, and seriously advanced medical science. And yet, the mortality rate in the 1970s for those given even this advanced care was still around 35%. All that progress and time, and it still took a huge chunk out of us, even in its death throes. So 200 years later, we didn't really create that. We didn't really have treatments. I mean, it literally resisted anything we could throw at it until vaccination. So if we would have continued without vaccination, we would continue to have 30 to 35% of people dying from smallpox because it just is that ravaging and that hard for us to get on top of that. No matter all this advanced shit, doesn't matter. We can't keep it from taking a bunch of its victims. Oh, and just as an added detail from the fun 1970s, one of the prescriptions from doctors for smallpox patients was to have the mirrors removed from the rooms of women suffering from the disease because they were too fragile in constitution to witness their beauty being erased so suddenly. That was a real thing. Remove the mirrors from the female patients' rooms. That was a thing. Because they couldn't stand to see their beauty gone. Oh, my God. The point is, our only hope was to stamp it out, not simply control it, right? This wasn't something that we could just like, let it go, naturally we'll deal with it kind of thing. Without a doubt, the vaccination efforts over the 100 years after Jenner's vaccine hit the world saved millions and millions and millions of lives, allowing for the modern industrial age that can now move forward full steam ahead. In 1858, Jenner was immortalized by a statue unveiled in Trafalgar Square alongside statues of England's greatest contributors and heroes, right? Trafalgar Square is this, kind of memorial to the great thinkers and contributors and leaders of England in their past. It would sit there in this lofty and honorable spot for a total of 4 years before a group of people loudly and angrily demanded it be removed. In 1862, the government bowed to the pressure and, unceremoniously under the cover of night, Jenner's monument was moved to Kensington Gardens, where he still remains, hidden in some obscure corner. And it is these folks I want to now turn our attention to. So he's put up as a hero, and then a group comes along and says, he shouldn't be amongst the heroes.
Cancel culture.
I think we're doing something new. We're not. As inoculation was accepted and spread throughout England in the mid-1700s, voices arose from both secular and religious sectors, warning the population against the procedure due to all kinds of ill-informed and sometimes downright disgusting viewpoints. From the religious side, we get a lot of fucked up opinions from a lot of really terrible people. One prominent voice was a man named Reverend Edmund Massey, who published and gave a sermon to as many people as he could, warning against the evil and godliness of inoculation.
Oh my gosh.
I read his whole sermon. God, it's long, boring, and makes you want to beat his ass. It is... First of all, he just repeats. It could be one paragraph. This thing is pages long. It just reveals just the inhumanity that exists in this supposedly loving religion that he's representing. But in it, he claims that Job is the example we should follow, hinting that he believes that the text is actually showing that the devil inoculated Job. right? So Job has all these pustules. Remember, he sits and he's got boils and he's spreading ashes on his head. Remember, he gets in that state, and it's like, because remember at first, okay, if you don't know the story of Job out there, people, but I know you do, Marnie, but just to kind of review, God's talking with Satan. Which, by the way,
like, look at my man Job.
Satan's in heaven, just hanging out with God, having a beer. So I don't know what you guys are thinking is going on. And he's like, look at Job. He's cool, right? He's good. And Satan's like, well, yeah, he's like daddy's favorite little boy. Like fucking his trust fund. Wow. I imagine how much stress he deals with. And he's like, if you took all that away, he'd fucking curse you. And God's like, okay, go for it. You can, right? First of all, God doesn't have a problem playing with this man's life, by the way. Again, there's a lot of if we would have made a movie about human characters doing this, we would say they're fucking sadists and sociopaths. Yeah. But anyway, he says you can do whatever you want, you just can't touch his body. And so he takes all the shit away, blah, 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 blah. Fucking kills his kids. Like the whole deal.
Oh my God.
And then still Job's like, whatever, God gives and takes away, blah, does all this kind of shit. And then Satan's like, well, yeah, but because he still has his physical health, he's fine. Who cares if his kids died? He's still alive. He's like, fine. He's like, okay, well, you can, but you can't kill him. And so at this point is when Massey preaches that what happened next was he, inoculated Job with smallpox, essentially, is what, or with smallpox, because this was the before vaccination that this guy's talking, right? Yeah. And so kind of, and from then on, he calls inoculation diabolical operations, like operations from the devil, right?
So he's saying that Job was sick because he got inoculated?
Yeah, he just throws that in as a detail. His point is we're supposed to have patience. And we'll get to what his two main points are, because his whole sermon is basically, why does God send disease? And it turns out God sends disease for only two reasons. Okay. So let's talk about that.
Let's hear the answers.
He tells people that God only dishes out disease for two reasons. Either to test your faith, right? Like Job. Okay. And basically, if you lived, that's what it was,
Yeah. If you died.
Yeah.
It's the other.
To punish you for
I knew
sin.
that was coming, yes.
And those who died obviously fell into this bucket. And the fact that this just and perfect God was killing about 80% of babies infected shows they had a really deep baby sin problem, apparently. Because that's what's so funny. Like, he's punishing you for sin. And you're like, what? Babies are dying. Like, what do we?
No, they're born evil, babe.
That's true. That's true. They're born from original sin.
Original sin. They're full of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, he was joined by other asshole preachers who continue to spread the word that if God wants to kill children, he should be allowed to do it, and we
without interruption.
And we don't have the right to rob him of that. Right? I mean, some of these sermons were downright, what right do we have to get into the providence of God? And I'm like, do you understand the definition of providence of God in this context is killing innocent babies for no reason with a horrible disease? He's not snapping his finger and they go peacefully to sleep and their spirit lifts off to heaven. He's destroying them over weeks, leaving them fucked up and probably dead. Yeah. And these motherfuckers are walking around going like,
that's what God
God's
wanted.
Biz, man. What are we're getting in the way
His
of God's
ways are higher than ours. You don't know.
Providence. Fuck
Shut up and
off.
take it.
Jesus Christ. And people now will be like, well, I would never have. You have the same opinion. It's just about other people and not babies because, we live in a different world.
With those opinions are sitting there listening going, oh, shit, I do think
some gay teen kills themselves. You're like, oh, yeah, his lifestyle led him to that. Or same fucking thing. Pieces of shit. Anyway. In England, the secular side of the argument was crazy too. Much of it came from unscrupulous physicians, unfortunately, who had built a small fortune off of treating people. Jenner wanted to give vaccinations away, and some doctors began spreading misinformation to ensure that money kept flowing in, right? They're like, this do-gooder's coming around, getting into our profit margins, right? They started linking all kinds of maladies, including several made-up ones. I mean, they're talking to a very uneducated populace, right? By and large. So you can just say shit as a doctor.
Oh, so the other people blocking immunization and being against it were doctors that wanted people sick so that they could get them.
They wanted people
money.
Yes, they didn't
to help them be better.
And it wasn't. Yeah, exactly. It really was kind of that.
Oh my God.
And whether they were intentionally going, let's make people sick so they'll come here, or just this vaccination thing is going to cut and they didn't go that, I don't know. But that's what they're doing. Which is
kind of what we even deal with today.
Fuck yeah.
With the whole medical industry. Yes. And
which is why it should be an industry.
Even the cancer industry.
Yes.
Why don't we have a cure? Because
there's a big industry behind it.
A lot of money behind not having.
There's a lot of pink products out there moving.
There's a lot of pink.
Yeah, and there is so much similarity. We are no different. Mm-hmm. The same shit's going on. Mm-hmm. We might have a slightly elevated,
and more of us doing it.
Yeah, like we're not talking about the color red or bleeding people anymore.
But we are drinking bleach.
Yeah, so what's the difference? It'd probably be safer to bleed yourself. Purge. No, don't purge. That's not good. They started linking all kinds of maladies, including several made-up ones, to vaccination to scare parents away from the procedure and drive them into their private practices. Parents were told that vaccination would lead to their children developing tuberculosis, blood poisoning, which is always, I love when people are like, oh man, and like I have some weird, like what was that, Joe versus my brain cloud, or whatever it was. Diabetes, syphilis, madness, and a really fun one they called bovine transformation, in which their children would literally start turning into cows, right? Because you're putting cow stuff in them. One story claimed a boy, after being vaccinated, started bounding around the house on all fours, bumps forming on his head where horns eventually broke through as vaccination changed him into a cow.
Oh my God.
You know what's funny? Oh, that reminds me. If people go listen to the third Dungeon and Dragon episode, this is similar to what happens in this boy, one of the boys that killed himself.
Yeah.
Remember, his mom finds out that he had been cursed with lycanthropy, which is being a werewolf, and the next thing you know, she starts telling stories about him running around all fours, and then these cats show up murder, which is really just him being maybe a little starting to show some forms of sociopathic behavior. But she created this whole thing around the same thing, so
people are crazy. They make up lots of crazy stories.
But these doctors are like, do you want your child to turn into a cow? Do you want a cowboy?
Do you want a cow?
Wait. What about cowgirl? Hey. We could have a whole cow people kind of. Oh my God. So crazy. There's even political cartoons making fun of these people saying this, and showing these crazy scenes where people are being vaccinated in one corner and over the rest are all transforming into cows and shit. It's so funny. And they're just going what is wrong with us? So even then, and again, like you said, we're no different. We just have a different context to pull stuff from. Others posed alternative theories regarding the cause of smallpox and insisted a healthy diet and homeopathy was all that was needed to prevent and cure smallpox. Just like today. All we did for thousands of years was alternative medicine, homeopathy, herbalism, and other systems we had developed. Didn't seem to stem the tide one bit.
Yeah.
They're all, we just need this. That is what we fucking did. We've
been throwing at it for hundreds of years.
For thousands of years.
Us still.
Yes. They're like, if we wouldn't have used all those pharmaceuticals 3,000 years ago, maybe some of us would have lived. No, all we were doing was homeopathy, herbalism, folk medicine, these things, because that's all we knew.
Yeah.
Was I don't know, try this. Rub some mud in his eye. Does that help? Even with campaigns to combat such propaganda, many, especially in the uneducated lower classes, bought such tales and decided against protecting their children, families, and communities from horrific death by smallpox. So essentially, we have people believing a bunch of crazy conspiracies, made-up anecdotes, fucked-up religious ideas, and alternative health quackery. Sure glad we are in a new modern world where such backwards thinking doesn't prevail. Wow, what a bunch of idiots they were. Oh, my God. At least then they had to write it on a fucking piece of paper and, staple it to a post somewhere for people to read shit. Now it's just I think
click.
this.
click. Here you go. Here's my mind. Here, click in your face.
Spread idiocy. While we're in the 18th century still, let's travel over to the shores of good old America to see what is happening over there. Over here, I should say. Smallpox was one of the primary concerns during the American Revolution. The British had used smallpox against the natives as a biological weapon during a dispute over a military fort. I shouldn't say the British, one British dude. And I should say, like, the British university named after this guy, Amherst, I think it was in the 60s maybe, the students actually had a protest there over this because it's just so funny how, like, in these rich, like, fucking, waspy institutions, the things they do. And they had this collection of decorative plates that were, like, one of the claims of fame of this, like, fucking who cares? Like, everything Britain does seems to be like what our grandparents
dishes,
did. Yeah. But on the dishes is depicted him chasing Native Americans with whips and just fucking them up and killing them and stuff. And he was celebrated for his taming of the savages.
Oh my gosh.
And they fucking broke them. They took these precious things and they smashed them and shit.
Okay.
So we
60s?
can't. Let's
Is that
not.
what you said?
I think it was in the 60s that happened. But I mean, it took a while, obviously.
Right.
It was about 200 years for that to happen. But so anyway, that was. They knew that story. They knew that smallpox had been used by the British as essentially a biological weapon, right? This rose concerns again amongst American leaders that they may do something similar to decimate the Continental Army and squash any chance at the revolution succeeding. Thomas Jefferson was appointed to an investigative committee to see if any intelligence could be obtained regarding the possibility. According to witness statements he gathered during the investigation, the American leadership believed that the British were inoculating poor people at the government's expense up in Canada, sending them into colonial towns and villages to infect people. Now, I couldn't find any proof that this was going on, but this is what they had found through questioning people that, they had kind of found. Their fears rose even higher when the British invaded Virginia. Reports came in that they were planning on sending in slaves who had defected to the British side and who had been infected with smallpox as biological weapons against the army. So some slaves in the colonies had actually defected. Of course you would. Like, sure, I'll fight this motherfucker that's whipping me and forcing me to work and separating my family from me.
Yeah.
Hell yeah, I'll shoot him in the goddamn head. Give me a gun. So they understandably defected over into the British side. Yeah. But then the Americans became concerned as they began hearing stories. Again, could be rumor, could be just be fear mongering, but. Don't you remember, like, they're sending anthrax to us and we're all like afraid to open up anything with white powder on it. Well, yeah, don't you know terrorists right now are on the southern border trying to bring in, all kinds of stuff, including more coronavirus into the United States. I mean, that's what we always do, right? So I don't know if this was going to happen either. I would not put it past the at that time, but I never saw anything. But this was a real fear is my point. And it wasn't like they didn't have information. It wasn't coming out of nowhere.
Now, you're saying that they were fearing that people were getting inoculated and sent in as...
You had smallpox then. You're like a little bomb. So you inoculate someone with smallpox and then send them into a town and then they come down with smallpox.
Is there a time? Are you supposed to quarantine after you get inoculated for a certain time?
They definitely did that. Eventually, once they found out, oh shit, we got to keep these people away from them.
So you got your shot and you had to quarantine because you were contagious for a certain period.
Yes, when you were during variolation, before vaccination.
Oh, you're talking inoculation.
I'm talking about inoculation with smallpox. Remember, they would try and give you a little bit of it to give you a little bit, but it made you contagious.
All right, thanks.
And so the collateral damage, they're like, we could cause, Yeah. And again, I'm not blaming the British or saying that they were going to do this. They might have been like, no, that's savage and horrible. We're not going to do that. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But they were definitely afraid of this, and they had information that seemed like this was a possibility. Mm-hmm. Okay. Jefferson was super on board with the procedure, being a man of science and reason. He himself was inoculated along with all of his children. And I would say he's a man of science and reason and up until owning human beings. And all of a sudden he becomes very unreasonable and unscientific. So all these motherfuckers are a complicated mess. John Adams lamented in letters about how more American soldiers died of smallpox than British bullets. True story, right? Smallpox was a enemy we fought also that could have tipped the balance of the war. That's why they're afraid the British were going to chuck it in there, because if they could take our numbers down enough, well, then revolution over. He was very influential in founding a hospital department to care for those afflicted. Writing to his wife, he stated, "The expense will be very great, but humanity overcame avarice." Remember when humanity was more important than saving money? Hey, we're just getting a taste of that right now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Right now, this thing that just passed, people can... Anyone who tells you it's $1.9 trillion, that seems like a lot of money. Those were rich Republican leaders who only give a fuck about giving tax breaks to the rich people. Mm-hmm. So they tell you that to make you think that actually means something. Mm-hmm. Our deficit, they don't give a shit about it, and you shouldn't give a shit about it either. Mm-hmm. And so what John Adams was saying is that this is going to cost a lot of money, but it's the right fucking thing to do. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening right now, and you shall be glad. Hey, man, if you're a parent right now, you need to go look at this bill, because I don't know if you really understand what you're getting out of this bill. Mm-hmm. You have 6-year-old kids or under, you get $300 a month per kid directly deposited into your fucking bank account.
Certain income levels, right?
Up to $75,000 for single parents and up to $150,000 for families. Yeah. Most people, that's like 80% of the people.
No, but I'm saying it's good, like, because the people above that don't need that money.
No, they don't, and and it does go down, I think.
As it goes up. Yeah, I read that. Mm-hmm.
And then I think your kids 7 to 17 get $175 a kid every month. Like, this is a huge fucking deal. It's going to change a lot of people's lives whose kids are living in situations that this should not happen in America. And yet, we're worried about a deficit. That's what John Adams saying. Like, fuck the price tag. These people need our help.
Yeah.
So I'm proud that that's happening once again. Along with Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin was a huge proponent of inoculation against smallpox. He had lost his beloved 4-year-old son Francis to the disease back in 1736. As smallpox hit revolutionary America hard, Franklin responded to the health crisis by founding America's first public hospital and its first medical school, right? It was in response to smallpox ravaging America. That's why we got public hospitals and medical schools. And it was Ben Franklin who founded it. Based upon the fears and information concerning smallpox possibly being used as a weapon against the Americans, George Washington inoculated all 40,000 soldiers in the army in total secrecy. He was afraid that if the British caught wind of this, they would attack while his troops were recovering and wipe them out. It is highly likely that without this strategic move, America would not exist as we know it, right? If he didn't do this, smallpox could have easily,
the force.
Right? But instead, we had to do in secret, and you had to hide them and put them, quarantine them in secret. Yeah, because you had smallpox for a while.
Yeah,
and you got taken down hard, and it took weeks to recover, and so they had to be hush hush about it. Jefferson became president in 1801. One of his main goals was to expand the country's commitment to this new vaccination. He had closely followed Jenner's work as its discovery unfolded. Bringing in prominent American physicians, he worked tirelessly to establish vaccination practices and clinics in line with Jenner's work and vision. His first summer as president, he inoculated all of his slaves, his sons-in-law, and many of his neighbors in an effort to teach and spread the procedure. In all, he vaccinated about 200 people
sons-in-law,
safely
but not his daughters?
And effectively. I think he already had inoculated his daughters prior.
Okay.
And then they got married and they hadn't been.
Oh, okay.
He vaccinated them.
Yeah.
This is vaccine.
Vaccine, not inoculated. So it sounds like the upper class and the poverty class got the special treatment and middle class got left out a fucking again. Because you're saying he inoculated his family and his slaves. Where's the fucking middle class get their vaccinations?
No, they are too, though.
I know, but first...
I don't know.
We're always getting the short end of the stick, man, the middle class.
Everybody has their own complaints about how they're getting screwed.
Well, I'm going to complain about mine. I'm the middle class, getting my screw.
In 1803, Jefferson wrote to Lewis and Clark, and they were preparing to...
Maybe I'm the lower class, and I don't know it.
I know, I was going to say, babe.
Actually, right now.
We used to be middle class. That's what I want to correct.
Now,
I was just thinking, like, people are probably out there thinking, like, oh, they're rich people. We were, and we're not. We live in the poorest neighborhood in the state of Washington. And we don't have a bunch of money.
Yeah, we're thinking the
I am on unemployment.
We're thinking the COVID release for helping us with our mortgage.
Yeah, seriously. Without the government, we would be fucked.
Yeah.
We're those people. In 1803, Jefferson wrote to Lewis and Clark as they were preparing to leave on their expedition west. He told them, carry with you some matter of the kind pox. That's just the American little thing for cowpox. Inform those of them with you that, oh my God, I got to read this again because they wrote so different back then. God. Carry with you some matter of the kind pox. Inform those of them with you. God, inform those of them with whom you may be of its efficacy as a preservative from the smallpox and instruct and encourage the use of it. I mean, Jefferson was like, everyone needs to know about this. Everyone needs to get it. It needs to fucking be everywhere. And so he tells Lewis and Clark, take this with you. They showed them how to do it, apparently. Got trained in it. And everyone you meet, do it to them, show them how to do it, and then get them doing it to other people, right? Like, this thing needs to spread. Thomas Jefferson was like really, really into this. And he was an incredibly scientific, this was that age of the Enlightenment. I mean, this is the guy who took the Bible and took out all the magic. He's like, there we go. Bunch of common sense. That's what it needs to be. The Jeffersonian Bible is like, and Jesus raised, whoop, line that out. And then Jesus healed, nope, line that out. And then, just all the miracles, anything that sounded like mythology or prophecy or anything, he took out. That's what what is it? So
it was just kind of like a bunch of wisdom words, like proverb type stuff.
Yeah, no, it's just sayings and common sense.
Yeah.
Because when you strip all that out, with the things Jesus says, it's common sense and everybody else has said too.
Yeah,
love one another. That's revolutionary.
You reap what you sow. It's like basic. Yeah, it's not like duh. That's what we watch happen.
We call it common sense because it's all stuff we've experienced and we're just writing pithy comments about what happens in reality. So
we didn't need a Bible. We just needed to write a bunch of fucking memes.
No, and when you take all the magic out of the Bible, there's no reason to have a religion around it.
It's a bunch of memes.
Right. So that's what Thomas Jefferson did. Hero of the religious right. Who wrote the book The Unitarian Church Uses Now. Who's from the pit of hell, according to evangelical Christianity. Anyway, we'll move on from that before I get too worked up. In 1802, John Quincy Adams invited Jenner to join the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. And in 1803, Harvard University awarded Jenner an honorary doctorate degree for his work and contribution to science and humanity. America was like, oh, that motherfucker saved our bacon. And they're starting to go, hey, And so he's a member of the, American Academy of Arts and Sciences still, and which was, you think about 1803. This is 27 years after the Revolutionary War. We just fought England. And then the American Academy of Arts and Sciences asked this British scientist to be a part of it. And then we award him from Harvard a degree. That's awesome. That shows how grateful the world was. They're like, hey, you could have been whatever.
But also, like, I don't know how... Yeah, I feel like they fought conflicts while still like they would go have tea afterwards and be like... Yeah,
but 9 years later, the War of 1812 broke out and the British burned the fucking White House. So it wasn't like, oh, good,
I know, but they would have, that's what I'm saying, between the conflicts, we
were more civil
together.
In a matter, yes.
Because they're just like, well, that was a problem, and we just like beat each other's asses, and now we'll come together and negotiate this.
Yeah. We were more civil. We weren't sending drones to strike each other. So, and maybe that contributed to the civility, was like, I can't say that because there's been a lot of brutal hand-to-hand. I don't know. But yeah, things were different. But still, it's pretty amazing that, we did that. A letter from this is cool right here, by the way. A letter from Thomas Jefferson to Edward Jenner was written on May 16th, 1806. In it, Jefferson tells Jenner, this is a cool quote, mankind can never forget that you have lived. Future nations will know by history only that the loathsome smallpox had existed. That's what I just said at the beginning, right? Thomas Jefferson's like, we can never forget what you did because in the future, people will only know that this fucking happened because they read about it. And they didn't live it. And he's like, I know that they won't understand how fucking brutal this was, how devastating it was. And they need to understand that you fucking changed this. So, see? Thomas Jefferson agrees with me, so fuck you. He went on, Quote, "You have erased from the calendar of human afflictions one of its greatest. Yours is the comfortable reflection that mankind can never forget." Right? But we did. Happens. Thomas Jefferson was an advocate for something else, too. Another step that he saw as vital to truly defeat this ancient scourge. That step was mandatory vaccination. Thomas Jefferson wasn't just like, everyone should get this. He was like, everyone will get this, whether I have to hold them down and do it or they line up.
The evil.
He saw vaccination as a complete miracle, one that would save American lives. He pushed hard his whole presidency to require everyone to have to undergo the procedure. However, he never succeeded in moving any such legislation forward at a federal level. And I just want to talk real quick about the right-wing phenomenon of circulating Thomas Jefferson quotes about how liberty sometimes have to be watered with the blood of patriots, and how Thomas Jefferson would never allow all these liberties that the liberals are trying to take. Fuck you. If Thomas Jefferson here, he'd say, sit your ass down and I'm jabbing this fucking coronavirus vaccine in you.
Yeah.
And I don't give a shit what you have to say.
Exactly.
But my personal liberty, not when it comes to the greater good.
Yeah.
So I don't want to hear about Thomas Jefferson quotes. First of all, look up most of the quotes attributed to Thomas Jefferson you see on memes. They're not his.
Yeah.
Most of them are made up out of whole cloth and never been said.
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson just gives him that hook, that edge.
Yeah.
A lot of them are like, someone said it 60 years ago. And they go, Thomas Jefferson. So fuck off with Thomas Jefferson and your liberty and personal freedoms. He was all for forcing everyone to get this because he saw it as something that... Now, I'm not saying I agree with that.
Right. But...
Now, do I agree with if we force everyone to get a vaccine, this thing would go away real quick? Yep. Just like... Do I agree that if we took everybody's guns, gun violence will go drastically down? Yeah, It would. Probably almost to zero. But also, there's complications and nuance. And so I understand that, that's a harsh thing that maybe we shouldn't do. Things were different in the state governments, though. For example, in 1809, after smallpox ravaged their populace once again, Massachusetts enacted mandatory vaccination laws, actions which quickly stemmed the tide, saving lives and the local economy in the process. In the decades that followed, California, Minnesota, and West Virginia would follow suit after seeing the success of such measures. So the states were like, I think it's a good idea. Smallpox is costing us tons of money in healthcare, in our economy. I mean, you think about people constantly dying and stores closing and money not being exchanged hands anymore. It had effects all over the place. And so Massachusetts is like, we have another outbreak. We can't do this anymore. Everyone's getting vaccinated. It's a law. Fucking get ready. You're not getting out of this. There are no excuses. You can't opt out. There's no, way to get out of this. You're getting it right. And it worked. And so California, Minnesota, West Virginia are like, fuck yeah, we're doing that too, because we're tired of dealing with this thing too, and people not getting what could stop it done, right?
Yeah.
It'd be very frustrating going like, all you have to do is this.
Yeah.
And you keep creating emergencies for me that, Anyway, also, I guess we could just talk right there too. The right has a lot of obsession over states' rights too. Have you heard about that? How they're always about states' rights? Can you imagine if one of the states decided to enact mandatory vaccination right now? They would fucking lose their minds. But it's like, I thought the states had rights to do what they think is right. Isn't that your whole thing? They're like, no, the states have the rights to make laws that agree with me and who I hate. I only like laws that keep people from doing things that I don't like. Fucking stupid. But anyway, in our past, in this fight, we had a president wanting to make it mandatory, and we had states who did make it mandatory. And guess what? It worked. And it didn't leave the streets of people, dead from vaccination all over, or like mind controlled or whatever. Okay, so now let's travel back over to the Atlantic to jolly old England once again, because they have some shit brewing there that will influence what happens in America during the latter part of the 19th century. Back in England, vaccination rates were increasing, however, due to many factors, not the least of which was vaccine hesitancy spurred by misinformation and fake science. It wasn't happening at a fast enough rate to keep up with the outbreaks that continued to hit the population. Kind of like the situation in right now,
No, I think
we're getting ahead of it now,
yeah.
but there was a time, a couple months ago where it's like, we're not vaccinating people fast enough and variants are, like that's, they were like, they're vaccinating people, but it's still, they can't quite get over that hump. This led to the Vaccination Act of 1853, which ordered mandatory vaccination for all British citizens, whole country. They're like, Thomas Jefferson's idea was right. We're doing it. Not that they said that, but I mean, it was. The first version required this for all babies up to 3 months old. So get your babies vaccinated, right? Because not only will that keep them from dying, but they're the ones that typically get exposed and then give it to a bunch of people or babies. And so if we can keep children, get them immune young, they won't grow up to be little spreaders. After rates continued to rise in response to this effort in 1867, so 14 years later, they revised the act to mandate vaccinations for all children up to the age of 14 years. So then it still was happening. And they're like, okay, and it was mostly coming from kids.
Way more resistance to vaccines back then than there is now, because I feel like we have success. Success.
You're born in a hospital and you have a pediatrician.
Yeah, but I mean, even in the
lots of things are different.
Even in the coronavirus, even with the stuff like anti-vax stuff and people being in vaccination hesitation that is I see and hear on the regular, it's still helping.
No, it is.
And slowing things down. So that says to me that we don't have as much resistance as they did back then.
Right.
Which is crazy because it feels like there's a lot of resistance.
Right. And I would also say, just to state a point, when you compare coronavirus and smallpox, right? They're both similar in a way, in the sense that they're equalizers. Coronavirus hits everyone. Doesn't matter your economic. Some diseases were more, like tuberculosis, happened more maybe in the lower classes and in environments and situations that were less hygienic and all that kind of stuff. But smallpox and coronavirus don't care about that.
Yeah.
It's equal opportunity.
Yeah.
The president got it. Senators have died from it. Good people, bad people, right? Like the president before. Even bad people got it and unfortunately didn't die of it. By the way, it turns out that he was really close to being in bad shape. They were going to put him on a ventilator. It was that close. He got vaccinated later in secret. What a fuck.
What a fucking prick.
So just in light of this story, imagine this. We got people trying to get people to be vaccinated because it saved their life. He's getting vaccinated in secret to save his fucking life. But keeping his people on their conspiracy tip and not... Oh, fucking what?
What a piece of shit human.
Yeah. No, I'm sorry. That's
worst.
disgusting. And anyone who followed him, he did not give a fuck about you. And you need to come to that understanding. Yeah, crazy. But anyway, so they change this law and say, okay, it's not working as well, and we need to expand the age. So they wind up changing the age all the way up to 14, right? So now it's like, you got all you guys, bring your kids in. In the span of time, the anti-vaccination crowd grew larger, louder, and more public. While debate around the 1867 changes were going on, a magazine called Human Nature announced the formation of a new organization to fight the dangers of vaccination. Human Nature billed itself as a serious scientific journal. However, it dealt primarily with fringe ideas such as spirit photography. Remember, this is like, this is heading into spiritualism and shit that we talked about with Helena Blavatsky. This is heading into that time of spiritualism, right? So a scientific journal at this time, a little wacky. There's a lot of telekinesis and are we psychic and spirit photography.
It's just like now.
It's just like now. But then, yeah, exactly. Fringe ideas such as weird esoteric ideas, and calling for reforms regarding the dresses of Victorian women due to them catching on fire and killing the wearers. They had a whole string of articles about this.
Wait, what is this? I'm sorry. What does that have to do with?
It was just part
smallpox?
of this. This is Human Nature. This is the anti-vaccination crowd. Kind of the first articles that show up are in this magazine called Human Nature. And I'm saying Human Nature billed itself as a serious scientific journal where you can get serious scientific information.
And these are the types of articles.
But it dealt primarily with these things. And while, like, you might think, who gives a shit about Victorian women's dresses? Turns out 300 women died a year at this time from those big frilly dresses catching on fire and burning them to death.
Oh my gosh.
A year. So they were on that tip, which was probably the only real one out of the whole thing they were talking about.
I wonder if there's any fashion that kills today and how many women die from it.
I don't know. I know polyester became a thing because of heat and fires and stuff, people melting and shit, getting whatever. I don't know. We probably have we have so many safety standards now and so many things that, if that happened to you, that clothing company is going to be sued for.
I guess my mind goes to cosmetic surgery stuff. When I think of fashion, they didn't.
Yeah.
That can be deadly.
Oh, yeah, there's plenty
of
weird stuff with that. Yeah, that's weird. Okay, so the magazine, Human Nature, right, published a series of articles in 1866 called The Vaccination Humbug, because they are British and can't help it. Humbug. In the articles, the author states, quote, a very large number of petitions have been from time to time presented to Parliament against compulsory vaccination, and many from parents who claimed that they had lost children by death through the operation and wished to give evidence respecting their cases. But these petitions have not been made public. Pretty specific,
gosh,
right?
Sounds so familiar.
In other words, people are saying stuff
all these
and
stories.
They are hiding the truth from you.
Yes.
Be afraid. I love how vague that is. Like, there are a large number, and from time to time, and I've heard that even some of them, and I've heard that some people, and they aren't. You're like, oh, fuck off! You don't have shit. You're scaring me. Yeah. And let's see. The article went on to state, quote, to overthrow this huge piece of physiological absurdity and medical tyranny. Also words that you heard if you listen to right-wing talk radio this week. Medical tyranny is something. And on Fox News, by the way, and OEN, you'll hear that constantly. Medical tyranny, medical tyranny. They're making us wear masks. Yeah. An anti-compulsory vaccination league has been formed, right? And so that was the big announcement. An anti-compulsory vaccination league. It goes on to provide expert testimony from a doctor named Richard Gibbs. Of course, his address turns out to be the same address for the league because it's based out of his house. There may be some conflict of interest here. They're like, an anti-compulsory vaccination league, and it just so happens they have an expert to tell you about their message, and it just turns out the expert is the fucking anti-vaccination league. It's like, let me tell you why the Bible's true. Here's a verse out of Deuteronomy. You're like, oh, okay. That's not circular logic. I'm fine. Gibbs is quoted in the article as claiming, quote, I believe we have hundreds of cases here from being poisoned with vaccination. I deem incurable. One member of a family dating syphilitic symptoms from the time of vaccination when all the other members of the family are clear. I think this is hilarious. I don't know how I came down with syphilis. Must have been the vaccine. I think it might have also to do with the gonorrhea I have too. Weird. These things are really dangerous, right? Like he doesn't say child. Okay. He says one member of the family. And that's very deliberate. I can tell you that for sure. That if it was a child, he'd be like one kid, because a kid with syphilis symptoms would be like, what? But it's like one dude in the family even came down with syphilis. And he said it was from the vaccination. Yeah. He's lying to you.
You're a little scapegoat. Take my...
Pretty sure he'd been to the brothels. But anyway, this doctor is just throwing shit out there. Again, anecdotes.
Yeah.
Whenever you hear someone say, like, this is true because this person told me that they knew a person that this happened to, fucking, that's not a true story. It's no longer true. It's just, people are creating their own narrative.
We do that all the time. But it's just still not, doesn't make it factual. It'll be like,
yeah, you don't base your life off of a story you heard from someone that heard it from someone. That's all I'm saying.
No, I know.
Yeah. Like that thing you had on your phone that was supposed to block the dangerous electromagnetic radiation.
I know.
They said that they knew someone that had cancer. That
I know.
They don't. Yeah.
I know. I fall. I fall for it every time.
You too. Marnee came home with this thing, this rare earth, which was just like a silicone pad that they sold her. That's supposed to glue on the back of your phone, and it like blocks all the harmful radiation, which there is none of off of it.
I know, and
the story she came back was, no, the lady at the store said that she knows someone whose brother had cancer, and this totally cured him of it after he started using this. I'm like,
I know.
Okay. And that woman just made fucking 3,000% profit off this piece of shit she sold to.
I know, and it's funny because I like to hold both beliefs. Like, this is probably bullshit, but I'm going to put it on my phone. It's probably stupid bullshit.
Better safe than sorry.
But I'm going to put it on my phone because sometimes I just like to follow bullshit.
Well, I actually have a very expensive tinfoil hat to sell you just to be safe. Okay, let's continue.
Because I'll wear it. It looks good.
It's true. So Gibbs, the doctor, who's also the league, by the way, or the head of it, says, quote, "We strongly advise parents to go to prison rather than submit to have their helpless offspring inoculated with scrofula, syphilis, and mania."
Scrofula?
Yeah, it was a bacterial infection back then.
Oh.
But that wasn't happening. But these were words that parents had heard. Mania, by the way. How do you get inoculated with mania? They're putting the crazies in you, you know. But you can see these people are just chucking shit out to an audience that they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't have they're like, mania. I don't want a maniac kid, you know, like I don't need a little maniac right in our house. So, yeah. And so he's like, go to jail. People did go to jail over this too. A common group from which people were jailed was known as the Peculiar People. Great name. They were a fundamentalist Christian sect founded in 1838 in Essex. Shout out to Love Island. Essex. A lot of Essex people on Love Island. God, I miss that show. Please, coronavirus, get over so we can get more hot young people on an island.
Watch the social experiment.
TV ever. And there's a lot from Essex. They believe the King James Bible was the lone source. By the way, they named themselves Peculiar People because
they named themselves that.
They did. Out of verses in Deuteronomy, and I think in 1 Peter, where it says, "You will be a holy priesthood, a peculiar people."
Yes.
And boy, are they. They believe the King James Bible was the lone source of truth and wisdom. All of the virgins and religions were from hell. They refused medical intervention or the use of wicked science on their members, choosing to pray instead, leading to multiple occasions of charges against them from the government due to children dying of curable.
We still have that fucking shit going on.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're no different. We need to not even try. Don't even go there. Yeah. We're no different.
Christian scientists
so the children are dying
still being put in jail for having their kids
die. So they've been in trouble with the government quite a bit because these kids are dying. They're like, you guys, we're trying to save your kids. They're like, no, the Lord, whatever. Yeah. Don't touch my children with your evil medicine. God, if he wants to kill my kid, I shouldn't stop him. That's what they were thinking, which is what the preachers were preaching also to people, As you can imagine, they were not super down with vaccination, and especially not being told that they have to do it. This led to many of them spending time in jail for their stance and refusal. Their community would eventually split in 1910 after a public fiasco tarnished their brand significantly. Due to their idiotic beliefs and trust in magic, their germy members caused a diphtheria outbreak, which could have easily been controlled through basic medical intervention on behalf of the sick. Mm-hmm. So these dumbasses who refuse to, who want to dwell in some weird magical time, they get sick and spread it all over the community, right? Mm-hmm. And the doctor's like, God damn it. Some of the community broke off of the, and the Peculiar People community broke off, forming the New Peculiars. It sounds like an 80s band, who reluctantly allowed science and reality to keep them living and healthy. While the Old Peculiars continued being walking, breathing public health issues for everyone. The Anti-Compulsory Vaccination League continued to distribute pamphlets, brochures, and deliver impassioned speeches full of pseudoscience and misinformation under Richard Gibbs until his death in 1871. Into this void, after a brief power struggle, stepped the Reverend and Mary Hume Rothery, who grew the organization into a very large and influential group by 1880, renaming it the London Society for the Abolition of Compulsory Vaccination. They enlisted a publication founded in 1879 called the Vaccination Inquirer, which is awesome, as the mouthpiece for their message. And so Gibbs dies, and then, people are trying to figure out what we're going to do. And of course, the wellspring of all medical and vaccination knowledge, a pastor's wife and her husband, the pastor, step into the role. And then out there was this magazine called the Vaccination Inquirer that had been founded a year earlier. And they adopted it and kind of formed an alliance to where they're going to get their message out through this magazine. Right. And so this publication, the Vaccination Inquirer, was started by a guy named William Tebb. He must be some kind of doctor, obviously, as he is presenting his expert inquiries into the proven science of vaccination, right? Nope. He was just a rich, privileged fuck who stuck his nose into every goddamn thing he had a hair up his ass about, right? He was just one of these guys. He was a health nut, a vegetarian. He promoted naturalism and alternative health remedies. He was an early animal rights activist. And just to show you he was probably insufferable, he was a teetotaler, a group who loved to lord their moral superiority over others based on their personal decision to abstain from all alcohol. So this guy, he had a lot of time and money. Yeah. And he just fucking is just, you know, he just needs to calm down. Mm-hmm. He had become super rich through a company he founded which made bleaching chemicals for the publishing industry. They bleach paper.
Yeah.
Since the Mandatory Vaccination Act went into effect in 1860, he had racked up 13 different prosecutions and fines due to his refusal to vaccinate his daughter. But he is super rich, so no big fucking deal. Imagine what buying into his bullshit did to the normal, non-rich people who were financially destroyed by fines or spent miserable periods in dank jails. It's always the fucking rich people telling you to not get help out of some principled stance. Mm-hmm. You know, I heard some Republican senators saying people should send back their payments out of like,
oh God,
political. I'm like, fuck you.
Yeah.
And then all those people should say, I'm taking the money, fuck off. Right? That's what's going on. You know, rich people who don't worry about $1,400. That means nothing. Mitch McConnell is a multi-millionaire. Mm-hmm. $1,400 means shit to him. Mm-hmm. $300 a month, that's fucking, he has that in the cushions of his couch that fell out of his pockets. Mm-hmm. So when they tell you that this isn't American and patriots know that this isn't how you should, this isn't smart, this is liberal socialist policies and we should have, fuck those people.
How is Mitch McConnell that rich? Is he writing books? What's he doing? I mean, that's not a salary of a congressman.
I know his wife is fucking hella rich. Does she own some company? She's on I don't know. They're all rich. All these fucking people are rich. Marjorie Taylor Greene is rich. She owned a bunch of CrossFit gyms. All these fucking people are rich. And she's like the heir of some construction company too. So she's fucking rich as fuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're not career.
No, they inherit it. They're all blue blood. They're all born into the fucking country. Not all of them, but the ones that like Mitch McConnell were. People weren't born like, they weren't like us, right?
No, I'm just saying it's not their government salary that's making them.
No, they're making like $250,000 a year or some shit like that. Government salary. They shouldn't make any, but if they have that much money, but whatever, we need to move on. It was in 1879 that this fuck, who obviously, by the way, when I'm talking about this fuck, I'm talking about William Tebb, who obviously had too much time and money on his hands and couldn't just stay over on his side of the pond, headed to America to preach his anti-vaccination propaganda. America was already fighting its own battle with misinformation and people refusing vaccines for all kinds of false reasons and narratives. This had caused a significant uptick in cases leading to outbreaks throughout the colonies. I mean, throughout throughout the United States, I should say. In the midst of America scrambling to address this and get people vaccinated, this guy comes over to get even more people to not vaccinate their children and family members.
So you got and that's what's happening now. We got trying to promote vaccines and then people promoting not. And God.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, we're just living this.
Yeah.
We're just lucky that it's not smallpox, that it's not this devastating. Yeah. And by the way, I want to say something about when I was talking about coronavirus and smallpox. Another thing that's interesting, smallpox killed children. Mm-hmm. And that caused a lot of attention.
Yeah.
Coronavirus kills old people. Mm-hmm. We don't give a fuck about old people anymore.
Apparently.
So if coronavirus was killing children, can you imagine public fucking uproar over why the government isn't doing more to do this? There would be no let's get schools open. They'd be like, fuck that. My kid's not going anywhere near. Like things would change drastically. Mm-hmm. Coronavirus attacks people that we have largely pushed off into the margins outside of our view. Mm-hmm. So I think that's interesting too. Mm-hmm. You know, smallpox killed, children, the most emotional response. And so, it's interesting how our attitude towards coronavirus is so kind of sometimes nonchalant, kind of cavalier. It's like, it's only killing old people, right? Mm-hmm. There have been people who said, like, they're going to die. Let them, it's going to happen. We can't stop the economy. Money's more important than all these old people.
And vulnerable,
people who are vulnerable
health-wise. So people are just like, well,
sorry. And it's just like, okay, when we could vaccinate and do all this stuff and make it better. So he's over there working against science, who's trying to save the lives of people that are dying. In the midst of America scrambling to address this and get people vaccinated, this guy comes over to get even more people to not vaccinate their children and family members. As he returned to England, he made sure to leave a group in place to continue the crusade. Based on his visit, the Anti-Vaccination Society of America was founded. I think that's interesting, by the way. In England, it's called the Anti-Compulsory Vaccination League. Okay.
So being forced to.
Right.
Because they were forced to over there.
They were. Okay. But listen, when he comes over and finds this, he doesn't call it that. No. He calls it the anti-vaccination.
So he's completely against it.
And I think you'll see that's true over in England too. They threw the compulsory in there because it made it sound reasonable.
Oh.
It would get people who are like, oh, yeah, I'm going to get the vaccination, but I don't want people to have to get the vaccination.
Yeah, don't make me, but
so he's
I'll
getting
do it,
people
but don't make me.
on the compulsory word, but we'll find their motives are not about that. It's about, just like here, it's the anti-vaccination. They're against it, period. And they're just trying to get you in.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how QAnon said, like, pedophiles, that will get people that don't know, and then when you get them in, then you convert them, then you brainwash them, right? In true American fashion, they were incredibly snarky about it, too. I love the American anti-vaxxers. They're less proper than England. In one ad they placed to gain membership, they refer to themselves as, quote, an association of half mad. There's all these sarcasm quotes in it. They're talking about themselves. An association of half mad, misguided people who write and toil and dream of a time to come when it shall be lawful to retain intact the pure body Mother Nature gave, sends greeting to a suspect. Liberty cannot be given. It must be taken. You're invited to join us, right? So they're like, people call us crazy and lunatics and dumb and misguided, but we're the ones fighting for your, to save you from this medical tyranny eventually. Yeah. Awesome. That's like the most American thing I ever fucking heard. Because that's exactly what people do now. Like, they say we're racist and all this stuff, even though we're doing a bunch of racist things, I'm like, okay, calm down. You are, and they're recruiting off of it. And that's what they were doing. Anti-vaccination movements in Europe and America sang from the same psalm book. Their claims against vaccines included the following ideas. Vaccination doesn't even work. There's a lot of people like, it doesn't even do anything. They're just putting nothing in you. There are people in the anti-vax crowd that will tell you this. Vaccines make you sick and contain dangerous chemicals. They said that back then. It didn't. They say that now. There's mercury in the vaccine. You hear moms all the time. That's what's making our kids all this stuff. And mandatory vaccinations equals medical tyranny and a loss of personal liberty, right? Oh, my God. That's all we hear now. It's like, get your government off of my whatever. I remind you of fucking Thomas Jefferson, but whatever. He would say, sit your ass in the chair and I'm jamming this needle in your arm. When William Tell got back to Britain, he doggedly lobbied the government and organized pressure campaigns against compulsory vaccination. In 1885, the anti-vaxxers in England organized a march against the government vaccination policies. See, same thing as now.
Yeah.
Let's get a march together.
Let's get a march.
It occurred in the town of, I think you say, Leicester, I don't know. In this town, which had been a hotbed of anti-vax activity for some time, 100,000 people gathered
against
in 1885 against vaccination.
And that's what I'm saying is like there was more against it per capita back then.
Probably
than now, because 100,000 back then is a lot.
Right. Now it was new. It was not based off of former technology, which we have now. And it did involve taking something from an animal and putting it in people. That freaked people out, probably. And there just wasn't that much known about it.
There wasn't
the average education level
of a person. I feel like it's understandable that there would be anti-vaxxers then.
Yeah.
That are that many. And not so.
Right. Then now when you can read a goddamn book.
When you can see decades and
there is 20 books that these people could sit down written for people like us who don't know shit and will tell you everything you want to know about vaccines and why they're safe, with the arguments against all of the conspiratorial stuff out there. But we don't do that. You
can have the knowledge, but you choose to only have the knowledge that fits your peculiarity.
We're like, no, I'm going to get in my Facebook group, and that's where I'm going to spend my time. Yeah.
So I like being a peculiar people.
Right. So 100,000 people gathered, marching through the town, carrying banners decrying the dangers of vaccination, punctuating their messages with children-sized coffins carried by those in the mass meet of people. They're like, have little coffins they're carrying, showing that they're trying to kill your children. They even carried and burned effigies of Edward Jenner, presenting him as an evil mad scientist endangering the lives
that's what they do with
of
Fauci.
their children.
Fauci is evil. He's bad.
Exactly. God. Based upon this public pressure in 1896, Parliament formed an independent committee to investigate the efficacy and safety of vaccination. Right? They're like, fine, we'll get a government committee together and we'll look into this. Right? The result of the study came back with absolute confidence that the vaccine was safe, effective, and did in fact provide immunity to smallpox. They did. They're like, hey, we looked into this. And they had people from both sides. They had doctors. They had, it wasn't like this, like we have now, like these bipartisan, whatever, nonpartisan panels. And they came back and they're like, look, it works. It's safe. And it's it's just, it's not hurting people. That has already been done for the vaccines that are going around, by the way. Now, today, everyone thinks like, I'm going to wait some time. You don't have to. They have if you understood the test, because I think people think like, well, they didn't have time, so they only tested on like 10 people. The reason why the vaccines happen so quickly this time, a year, that most time it takes years. Decade, is because rather than do things serially, they used to do research, development, testing, animal testing. And finally, way down the road, did they finally do human trials and things like that. And even then, we did everything at once with this one. The approval process and getting all the bureaucratic nonsense out of the way was already starting, not to just rush it through, but to make sure everything was in place so that when
it was ready, it was ready to go through.
Right. And they're like, it could take 2 years because, we got to make sure this is safe. These people were not looking to put out any old thing.
Yeah.
And it is an absolute feat of human
coordination and collaboration.
All of that. It is like landing on the moon. It is no different. When these doctors talk about developing these vaccines that work so well, some of which are based off of new technology. That mRNA technology that's in the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines, the woman who discovered that and literally invented that to a large degree, or at least found out how to use that, she just won the Nobel Prize in 2020, right? This is like not something they've been...
And she'd been working on that.
Yes, for a long time.
Before. So people are like...
Since she was a kid, she was fascinated with wanting to do this or something.
Yeah. And,
weird story.
And I think that people kind of think that like, oh, this just came out of the blue and they're just trying it. Like they've been researching this.
We don't live in a world that allows that to happen.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
There is so much liability. There is so much public whatever. There is so much government scrutiny. While medical watchdog organizations, these vaccines were peer-reviewed by people that had nothing to do with the pharmaceutical industry, nothing to do with the government, no politics. They were just people going, I want to make sure the safe.
Well, people would argue with you saying there's no liability, that because rushing it through, that actually waives the ability to go after them.
Oh, the liability.
There's a thing that they push it through the FDA quickly, and it actually waives the right to come back at them with a class action suit.
Oh, okay.
And so they had to do like a whole bunch of, they're still trying. I don't know what the outcome is. Yeah. So I'm just saying, I know that there's a procedure, the pushing it through quickly, that bypasses liability.
Right.
That's what people are concerned about.
Whatever.
I don't know what the liability is going on with this one. I'm just saying, I know that is what they're pulling from probably, is that it is a thing that when you push through past the FDA quickly, there's something that does that. And I'm super vague in it, and it sounds anecdotal, but I don't
know. I believe
know a guy who knew
I believe
a guy.
you, but I don't know.
Do.
Okay. So that, like I said, like they have this government study, and it comes back saying, yeah, it works. I know you guys want us to come back saying it's dangerous, but it works. But they also suggested that maybe the compulsory part of the act was causing the angst, and removing it might reduce this pressure and lead to more acceptance. Probably. You know what I mean? It's kind of that idea of like, compulsory is practically better.
Right.
It is.
Yeah.
If we take out the human component, the psychological, the emotional,
but we can't
because that's what we are.
Yeah.
And so I think the compulsory thing probably kept a lot of people who otherwise maybe could have been convinced to take it through
as soon as you tell me I have
information.
to fuck off.
Then all of a sudden there's a whole new there's a whole new instinct in us that rises up of rebellion, and especially against a government, right? And especially when it comes to our kids and things like that. So the Vaccination Act of 1898 was passed in response to this, removing the penalties for not vaccinating your kids and putting in place the very first conscientious objector clause in a law, allowing parents to philosophically opt out of vaccinations. We have those over here in the United States.
Yeah.
But believe it or not, every state has something different. And there are states where you cannot philosophically opt out. If your kid's going to school, a public school, the only opting out you can do is not have them be there. You can't just go like, well, I believe, fuck off. Then we believe you should keep your kid at home, you know? So, you know, again, we're just dealing with a lot of this stuff that they were dealing with.
So it just made me think like, oh, then they put their kids in private school, and I'm like, ooh, that's where all the anti-vaxxers are. Then my kid's going to get if I was going to put my kid in a private school, I would make sure to vaccinate him keep him safe from all the unvaxxed germs there.
All these little fucking privileged germs. All right. Interestingly, the response of the London Society for the Abolition of Compulsory Vaccination, which they just eliminated.
Wait, say that again? What?
So remember, William Tedd's organization is called the London Society for the Abolition of Compulsory Vaccination. Mission accomplished.
Oh,
they put pressure on the government.
Right, so they
said you no longer have to vaccinate your kids.
Yeah.
So you should think they'll dismantle their organization and claim victory, right?
Yeah. No.
In 1898, after this battle was won, they rebranded as the National Anti-Vaccination League. They're like, no. That was never our goal. What they wanted was that report to come back to say it was dangerous.
Yeah.
But it came back and said it was safe, but we won't make you do it anymore. And they're like, oh, we're still mad. We got what we want, and we're pissed off.
Well, because that's not what they wanted.
Making it clear that compulsory part was just a cover that seemed reasonable. They would continue to infect the minds of many people with lies and pseudoscience on their mission to apparently ensure smallpox continued to kill children. William Tedd doggedly pursued his pet passions until his death. He pushed for some of the first animal rights laws, lobbied for pacifism, and he even co-founded the London Association for the Prevention of Premature Burial.
What?
Which campaigned to ensure people were actually fully dead before they were buried, because this was a problem back then.
I would appreciate that be a thing.
Yeah.
That
he even stated in his own will.
Was that necessary? There were people getting buried not dead yet?
Yes.
Holy
he even stated in his own will that there must be, quote, unmistakable evidence of decomposition before they did anything with his body. They're like, make sure I'm dead. A week after his death, they cremated him, satisfied he wasn't burned alive. The anti-vaccination society he founded and helped spread wielded significant power and had amazing longevity. Their pressure led to the Labour Party adding a commitment to their platform to halt mandatory vaccinations only 2 years after the Act of 1898. So they put it as part of their political platform. The Labour Party is like the left, like the Democrats over there. I think they were still at this time too, but I don't know that much about English politics. So today they are. And they made part of their political platform to appeal to this crowd that they would always be against, that no mandatory vaccinations, as part of their political thing. So that the parents worried about are they just going to vote for it again in the future when they get into power, kind of thing. They would continue to distribute bullshit, medical myth, and fear-mongering all the way till 1972, man. That's how long this organization lasted. Meanwhile, back over in America, prominent voices were insisting on exercising their liberty to spread dangerous misinformation. Just like today. Freedom of speech to tell people wrong things that get them killed. One such voice was Emmanuel Pfeiffer, a doctor in Boston. He believed that all you had to do was be healthy and smallpox would never infect you.
Oh, that sounds so fucking familiar.
Right?
Coronavirus. Right? All you have to...
I know. That's what I'm saying is this is just like now.
Oh my gosh.
Okay?
It's such victim blaming
We're
too.
just fucking lucky that this isn't as bad as smallpox.
You didn't take care. Now, there is cases where it hurts the vulnerable.
No, it does. Health has a huge deal with it.
Yeah.
But it's not just. It's still an infectious disease. I've also read stories of marathon runners who are healthier than me that fucking died.
Yeah.
So, like, it's not
so
as cut and dry as we want to make it.
When people are like, you should have been eating better when you got sick. I'm like, dude, I was fucking eating the best I've ever eaten. I was working out the most when I've gotten the sickest in my life. Twice in my life, I've been the healthiest and got the sickest. Shut the fuck up with you're not healthy enough, and that's why you're sick.
And in fact, our level of health actually has nothing to do with our being infected with this disease. It has to do with our response to this disease. And it's just like now, back then, there were a lot of people also with all kinds of stuff we didn't know was going on.
Like if I have an out of whack immune system that is like overactive and reacts to things, me being super healthy is going to make my immune system really strong and make me fucking attack myself harder.
There are people on drugs to keep their immune system from killing their bodies because it's so powerful, basically, and confused. There's issues going on, but anyway. So this guy, Dr. Pfeiffer, is like, you just have to be healthy and you'll never get smallpox. These people getting smallpox are just weak and not taking good care of themselves.
Oh, God.
To prove his point, he made a big public display of visiting a nearby smallpox ward in a hospital. He promptly caught the disease and came within an inch of death before he recovered and dealt with the aftermath. And yet, still he went around claiming that his healthy living ideas were the key to immunity from smallpox, selling his products and systems along the way. Oh, and conveniently immune from smallpox now.
Yeah.
What a fuck.
Yeah.
And so whenever you hear, well, I read this book by Dr. So-and-so, I don't fucking care if they're doctor.
Yeah.
That doesn't make them smart, and it doesn't mean that they have your best interest in mind.
Yeah.
This guy's interest was in fucking spreading his message to make him famous and rich and all this kind of shit.
Remember those fucking doctors in the middle of shutdown that were all blah, blah, blah?
That's exactly what I was... Thank you. That was exactly the point I was going to. Do you remember all these fucking people we listened to on YouTube tell us coronavirus was no big deal and was going to be over soon and everything they're telling you was a lie?
Yeah.
And they were all doctors.
Yeah.
And then you find out that they're fucking, I don't know, some fucking basic stupid doctor in some basic stupid town and knew nothing about, they weren't an immunologist. They weren't a fucking endocrinologist. They weren't anyone important that knew shit. They went to medical school. Big fucking deal. So we need to stop that nonsense. In 1896, a little boy died in Minneapolis, land of Prince. He had been vaccinated 7 months earlier, and his mom became convinced it was the vaccine that did it. Of course, this is at a time when there are millions of ways to die around every corner, and 7 months seems like a long time for other shit to happen. But she was pissed off and super ready to fight, right? She's kind of like, my child died, and I don't know, the only thing I can think of is that he got vaccinated 7 months earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, there's a lot of things that you can't think of that happened to that kid.
Yeah.
And this is a time when kids are dying from all kinds of diseases, right? And so, again, you see this today, too. It's like, oh, my kid is autistic, and it must be from the, like, there's a lot of things that happen.
I know that we want to understand what's
Simple
happening.
answers are so
but
nice.
Tagging it on to the wrong problem isn't solving the problem.
Exactly. And it's like, because our experience with these things are so personal, our perspective is so narrow. Yeah. My kid was killed by this. Yeah. Whereas doctors are looking at the perspective and like, there's no fucking way your kid was killed by that.
I mean, it's this
because of all this.
Just to even parallel, like naming the wrong problem when they were doing the Save the Children for QAnon, aiming it at the wrong perpetrators does not stop the actual crime. So quit fucking around and pointing the finger in the wrong direction for your political purposes. Right. And let them focus on what the real perpetrators are. Okay.
Yeah. So she's super pissed off. And in response, she rose to the position of editor for a magazine called The Liberator, which I think that's a sex toy store now. Liberator.com. I think that's true. Okay. Where housewives, preachers, and the uneducated all declared their newfound expertise in shit they didn't understand even a little bit. We have that going on now too. Anyway. By the early 1900s, nearly half the American states had mandatory vaccination laws. Half the states. Though enforcement and penalties varied between them. Like, not all of them were fining people, but they had mandatory things saying, like, you got to get vaccinated because we got to fucking not let this shit happen.
Yeah.
For example, Massachusetts had laws that allowed local cities and towns to put the mandate into effect in response to emergency situations. They're like, every city and town, if you have an outbreak, don't run it up. Don't take the time it takes for all this to happen. Just lock them down, basically.
Yeah.
In 1902, Cambridge was hit with a major and horrific outbreak, triggering their emergency protocols to ensure everyone was vaccinated and protected, saving lives and stemming the tide of the epidemic. In trying to enforce the mandate, they experienced an intense pushback and friction from some elements of the community, right? Things came to a head when a man named Henning Jacobson refused to be vaccinated. He claimed that as a young child, he was made sick through inoculation, which, by the way, was always the case before Jenner's breakthrough.
Yeah.
Everyone got sick from inoculation.
Yeah.
That was the point.
That was why we're doing vaccinations.
So first of all, it's like, idiot, you didn't understand what happened to you then.
Yeah.
Like, I thought it was supposed to save me. Yeah, by first making you have to go through a little bit here. And that one of his kids had been hurt by vaccination. Again, okay. The government brought him up on charges. He made his way through the Court of Appeals until his case reached the Supreme Court. In 1905, the Supreme Court ruled that the states did, in fact, have the power to enact mandatory vaccination laws. Didn't win. This only enraged the anti-vax community further. Again, a lot of these people are big states' rights people, and when the Supreme Court upholds states' rights.
Well, you keep talking like it's all like right-wing people that are anti-vaxxers. I'm sorry, but it's big lefty.
It's not.
It's majorly mostly lefties, and then the rights they've got their like crew in there too.
It's lefties and righties for different reasons, yeah.
Well, yeah, but it is like, so it's not generalized.
If you look at the statistics and the polls coming out on who's wants the vaccine and who doesn't, more Republicans say that they refuse to take the vaccine than...
I'm sorry. This current vaccine, yes, is politicized against Republicans against it and
that's why I'm saying states' rights. I'm talking about
for it. But you're saying states' rights, blah blah. But traditionally, anti-vaxxing has not been predominantly right.
No.
That's what I'm saying.
No. Yeah, you're right. Like, from a health standpoint, it hasn't predominantly been a right-wing thing. From a conspiratorial standpoint,
it's only
been
a
right-wing
phenomenon
thing.
of the present because of the fucking phenomenon of these political times with...
Right. The left-wingers are like, oh, it's not healthy for my kid. And the right-wingers are, they're putting chips in you. It's the mark of the beast. They're like, have different ideas.
But kind of the same mind, though, what we've talked about in the past, those extreme ends.
Yeah.
But it has sat and grown in the left side, the anti-vaxxing, because they're the more granola people. There are granola right-wingers.
Yeah.
I knew them in the church.
Yeah.
There's a certain type of Christian that is a granola.
Yeah.
Which is the same type of person who's a granola
Crunchy
on the
Christians.
left side. It's the same type of person.
Yeah, totally. So throughout the 19th and early 20th centuries, the messaging and material from these anti-vax groups largely remained static and repetitive. They were dealing with a single vaccine for a single disease, and not much changed around it for 100 years. They didn't have any new material to work with, right? So it was like, it's hard to fight the same goddamn thing that's working, by the way. Because, like, all these people would have probably died by now.
It's changing the world. Stop it. And I have nothing to say to compare to the magnitude of its greatness, but I'm still going to fight.
But for like 100 years, their story didn't really change. It was just kind of like monotonous, the same shit. It doesn't work. It's going to hurt you. It's whatever, medical tyranny, your rights, and all this stuff over and over. That changed in 1885 when Louis Pasteur announced and introduced his newly developed rabies vaccine. This kicked off a period of development that fanned the flames of the anti-vax groups who suddenly had a new lease on life and a renewed opportunity for cultural relevance, right? New vaccines that we can spread misinformation about. Finally, I'm so bored with smallpox. 35 years later, in the 1920s, a diphtheria vaccine was developed. In 1943, a vaccine for pertussis was approved for use. Polio followed in 1955, measles in 1963, mumps in 1967, and rubella in 1971.
That's so wild.
All diseases that used to kill and maim mostly children, now able to be avoided, controlled, and even wiped out entirely.
Those were brand new vaccines, basically brand new when we were getting them. And it's so funny because I just assume that they were just like always there, but we had just rubella. That was a brand new vaccine that they probably gave us when we were.
This is
born in 70 and 71.
Yeah, and like the smallpox vaccine, the rabies vaccine, that Pasteur came from natural.
You don't just. That's not for like a baby one that you give rabies.
No, you don't get. I don't think so.
I think you get that.
I don't think we give rabies vaccines anymore because it's not prevalent.
Yeah.
Whereas back then you were around animals a lot.
Yeah.
And so
it's more like situational.
Yeah. I don't think we do preventative rabies anymore. What we do is we have stuff to treat you, which I heard sucks. I've heard it's not a great time to get the old shots, but we I
didn't even think of rabies. I just remember
we give anti-rabies drugs that are effective in basically keeping it from happening. So.
We don't even think about rabies anymore. But I remember, I know, but I remember knowing about rabies as a kid, being terrified of it.
Because the cartoons are so, like a rabid dog.
Right, but that's just like not even depicted in the world today.
Not really.
For kids to even think about rabies or be afraid of it. But I remember knowing about it and being afraid.
Until you get bit. And then you think about it.
Right, which is I was terrified of dogs. I guess that's what, that's why I had it.
That's why you had it.
I had a dog that bit people, so I was aware of rabies.
Yeah.
Now, my dog didn't have rabies, but I was aware of rabies, and I was aware of the treatment. It sounded horrible, and that's funny. That's why I was.
And I think we switched to vaccinating our dogs.
Yes.
So we don't vaccinate people.
Yes. Yeah, you get your rabies shot for your dogs,
But anyway, the other stuff was on the heels of medical science advancing drastically, right? Mm-hmm. That's why they came on, because new technologies and new understandings.
All of a sudden they could now.
Yeah, and all of a sudden like, oh man, we could go after this with something similar, and then
which is why they're multiplying, and like now the complaint is there's so many vaccinations that kids are having from even when we were vaccinating our kids, and I don't know even what's going on with vaccinations that way, because I don't have little ones.
There's lots of opinions about that too. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There are some that say it doesn't hurt you. There are some that say spread them out, then it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. Go look and research people who know what they're talking about, and not people who are trying to incite fear or grab onto some emotion in you.
Right.
If they start with, do you want your kid to be autistic? Don't listen to that person. Because they're not coming at you with facts or like they're not trying to give you real information.
And if they want you to be extremist, like nothing at all, like.
If someone's trying to sell you an idea or an ideology, they're not coming at you from a place of, I care about you. Mm-hmm. They're coming at a place from, I care about me and getting you on board with me. Yeah. Mm-hmm. With these medical breakthroughs while these medical breakthroughs increased our health as well as the length and quality of our lives, they also provided fresh meat to the anti-vaccination movements, who once again could project their own ignorance with a new round of fears driven by falsehoods. And then the 80s and 90s. In the glittering, glowing age of mass media, TV, and celebrity, popular entertainment figures joined self-appointed, quote, experts to spread anti-vaccination propaganda. To kick things off, a documentary was released in 1982 by a journalist named Leah Thompson. Not that Leah Thompson, different one.
I don't know what Leah Thompson.
Remember, she was like one of the Brat Pack 80s actresses, remember? Wasn't she in all kinds of shit?
Okay.
It was called DTP, Vaccine Roulette. Okay, first of all, that title right there, I know it's bullshit, right? Because even the title is like, be afraid, In it, she presents a bunch of common fears, boldly and confidently linking the DTaP, that's the diphtheria, tetanus, and DTP. Pertussis vaccine, to a broad range of childhood disabilities. She even claimed that the DTaP and hepatitis B vaccines were responsible for SIDS, something that was in the news and frightening new and expecting moms everywhere at the time. It was a convenient and timely hook to get their emotions. Yeah. So right now, we don't hear about this, but remember back then, almost every news thing coming up, a new look at SIDS. What's stealing our babies' lives? SIDS was sudden infant death syndrome is what SIDS. I'm not telling that to you. Telling that to other people. It was everywhere. We still don't fucking know what was going on. Is it still happening
at the same level? We're just not talking about it?
It's rarer now. But something was going on. And of course, the exposure made it seemed like more of it was going on than what was going on. But it was a very hot topic that moms were afraid of. And so now autism is what everyone's afraid of. So they tie vaccines to autism. Back then, SIDS was everyone. So they tied vaccines to SIDS.
Okay, yeah.
Both are wrong, but you can see how they're trying to get you through emotion. Do you want your baby to die? That's what they're asking you. And of course you don't. Well, then you better listen to me. I'm a journalist talking about vaccines. What?
And you're hyper aware of dangers when you're thinking about your baby.
Totally. And you're, of course.
And it's a subject that you're new about and very passionately vigilant about. You don't have information, but you're passionate about it. It's easy bait.
Yeah, you're not being
easy.
Lazy daisy with your baby's health. No evidence was presented, of course, just a string of scary antidotes. Again, this person said this, designed to strike fear in the hearts and minds of the gullible and the concerned. The result was numerous lawsuits against vaccination companies as parents looked for a scapegoat for their children's health issues. To a very large degree, this documentary is seen as the origin point of the modern anti-vax movement. So, after that, parents went like wait, my kid has issues. It must have been from that vaccine, and of course none of them was, but then they start, going after. It's kind of like the Dungeons and Dragons things again. My kid killed himself. It couldn't have been because he was troubled or had anything to do with me and my relationship with him. It was Dungeons and Dragons. It was Satan, and this is like, oh, okay, now I know why.
And it becomes an easy catch-all because there's so many babies. Pretty much most all babies were vaccinated, so then you could just it's an umbrella for everything.
It is. It's kind of like
catch
that
all
thing.
The problems.
Yeah. It's kind of like I heard an argument one time talking about how marijuana is the gateway drug to other hard drugs, and another guy said like, well, if you said that, you could also say drinking milk is the gateway to other drugs too, because we all do that too. Kind of like just because things are coincidentally or in the same mix. So anyway, in 1984, self-proclaimed medical heretic Robert Mendelsohn, one of the first anti-vax pediatricians, wrote The Medical Time Bomb of Immunization Against Disease. Okay, again, notice the title. He's right up front. He's getting you. He asserts that the pertussis vaccine caused brain damage and, quote, this is his word, retardation. We don't like that one anymore, but that's what he said in children. He also railed against the fluoridation of water, preached that coronary bypass surgery was fake. He's like, they're not even doing anything to you. They're just fiddling around and charging you a bunch of money. Jesus fucking Christ. And was against requiring nutritionists to be licensed. And he taught that routine breast cancer screenings were dangerous and should be avoided. So this guy's just spreading a bunch of misinformation that is getting people hurt for real, The 1990s provided the movement with even more of a megaphone as celebrities spouted their opinions on shows such as Phil Donahue, Sally Jesse Raphael, and Maury Povich, decrying the dangers of immunization. Explosive controversies meant huge ratings, which meant huge advertising dollars, which meant get these idiots on to say whatever gets people worked up and watching.
Yeah.
Lisa Bonet, for instance, former Cosby Show cast member. Maybe her only redeeming quality is she was married to Lenny Kravitz for a little bit. Appearing on Phil Donahue in 1990, shared her expert understanding of how vaccines are, quote, alien microorganisms that are the true causes of cancer, leukemia, MS, and of course, SIDS. Because she got on that tip too, saw that article, and again, everyone was afraid of it at the time.
Yeah.
So if you're going to Lisa Bonet for vaccination advice, you're already starting in the wrong direction. Yeah. like no. Not only that, she said all kinds of other bullshit. That's just, she's nuts, right? But in 1990, she was on the Cosby Show.
Yeah.
She was a role model.
Yeah.
And for some reason, today too, if someone is a celebrity, we trust what they say for some reason when they're acting and lying to us for a living.
Yeah.
And yet we think they're being authentic all the time. And it's like, no, you guys, and they went to fucking drama school, or they didn't even do that. They went from being a waitress to an actor. And it's great that they're doing that. We love how they're entertaining. But don't tell me about vaccinations. Stay in your goddamn lane, Anyway, in 1994, the reigning Miss America, Heather Whitestone, held the distinction of being the first deaf woman to win the title.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
She used her platform to decry the dangers of the DTaP vaccine, claiming it was this dangerous cocktail that had stolen her hearing in the first place. This caused her doctor to have to set the record straight when he informed the public that, in fact, her deafness was caused by a form of viral meningitis, a disease that could have been prevented by a simple, safe, and available vaccine when she was born.
Oh, shit.
So she's like, oh, it's because I got this. And it's like, no, it's because you didn't get
a
this.
vaccine.
Right.
Whoa, I don't remember that.
Yeah, true story. He had to come out and be like, we don't usually do this, but this is such misinformation and it's so dangerous for people to associate this. I don't want people thinking that start ascribing their kid's deafness to the vaccine when that doesn't happen. So he had to come out in public and say, no. Not only did it not happen because of that, it happened from a disease that we had a vaccine to prevent.
Yeah.
And she got because she didn't get the vaccine for it. Yeah. But while all of this activity sparked an increase in vaccine hesitancy, the real harm would come in the form of a British physician named Andrew Wakefield. And it is this fuckhead we will focus on in part 3, as he is the patron saint of the modern day anti-vaccination movement. So when you talk about autism and all that stuff, that's the current thing. That's the new SIDS.
I was waiting for who died recently. She was a spearhead lead person in anti-vax in America, and she died a year or 2 ago. Huh. You didn't find her?
I don't remember. Well, maybe I will when as I'm looking into this further.
Oh, this one.
Yeah. Because I've been mostly dealing with the past
history.
And the history.
Right.
And now
I bet she'll come up. Yeah.
But there is one man, a British physician, who published an article that set off this whole autism thing. Yeah. So whenever you hear parents, dealing with the anti-vaccination thing through that lens of autism and linking those things, it goes back to this guy. And so next episode, we'll talk about him and see how we should not trust anything he said. The whole scientific community has completely retracted any kind of, respect for him. He has shamed his profession, and unfortunately, his message remains, though. Yeah. It's that whole alpha male thing. There's alpha males. Oh, wait, there's not. And people just keep running with it, right? Yeah. So, unfortunately, today, driven by people who have real concerns and they're dealing with real issues, and I understand that. I wish your kid didn't have that issue going on or whatever is happening with them. Yeah. But people are preying on them, and they're giving them simple answers to very complex problems. Yes. And it's not good.
Yeah, because you're going in the wrong direction. You're not addressing the actual problem, and it's a whole bunch of energy spent not solving.
Yeah. I'm certainly not going to cover autism or anything because I don't know. All I can tell you is that in the very little I've looked into it, the answer to why it happens is they don't fucking know. Yeah. They don't know. Yeah. If it was as easy as a vaccine caused it, they would figure that out and they would change that because that's how the medical community works. They don't rub their hands in the corner going like, who cares if it gives them autism? Oh my God. That's not how it works by and large. Yeah. And so their whole thing is framed around this very victimization kind of idea that people are doing stuff to us. And it does give a very simple, concrete answer that they can latch onto to something that's very confusing. I can only imagine what it feels like to wake up every day dealing with that. Yeah. We have friends and folks that are dealing with it.
Like, it's the conspiratorial tough. People tend to be people who are like, there's this cabal to control you, right? But getting you a vaccine that then makes you autistic, which actually autism, you're typically not functioning in society that's controllable. You're being a little bit different and creating an issue that doesn't function well in being controlled. So what value would some cabal have in creating something that would make people be more difficult to control? Yeah. It's not really...
And let me tell you,
meeting the goal of having power over people and controlling them.
Just to beat one of my dead horses, too, what you just said, that whole idea that there are people out there doing stuff to you for a reason, to control the population. They're trying to kill us. They're trying to put us under their thumb and make us subservient to their global rule. That all comes from the protocols of the elders of Zion. Those were anti-Semitic conspiracies. They still are. Because when you ask people who's controlling the world, Hollywood elite, the global banking system, Jews, okay, Jewish people, that's the stereotype. That's the code words. Globalists, whatever. Jews is what they're talking about. Remember Plandemic? Remember that fucking video that crazy bitch put out? I just heard her speak at a QAnon rally not that long ago, maybe a month ago.
Yeah.
And she's up there telling everyone, take off your mask. This isn't real. And masks only hurt you. They're doing this on purpose to make you sick. You're breathing in. Okay, listen, though. Let me keep going. You're breathing all this in, and this is dangerous. And she takes her mask off, and she's saying, we shouldn't. And she makes a bunch of bullshit things. And then she closes by saying, however, if you do want the only mask that truly does something, I'm selling them in the back.
Are you fucking kidding me?
This is what they're all doing.
Yeah.
I don't care if you're a fucking, like what's his name? Kennedy from a political family out there sounding all reasonable and shit. He's selling shit. His own shit.
What's he selling?
Himself. He's a fucking Kennedy. Thing? He doesn't need money.
Yeah.
He fucking is selling his fame, his whatever. Yeah. He's not out there trying to make a difference because he cares about people. Fuck off. They don't care about people, these rich people. So Alex Jones is out there still telling you that they're injecting you with this. They're giving you that. They're doing this. They're trying to control the population. He said one time just recently, he's like, hundreds of thousands of people are dying after getting this vaccination, folks. Gosh. They know it. They know it. Like within 2 weeks, you're dead. You're dead, folks. That's what is being told people. Anyway, next week, we'll look at the more modern, where we get to talk about Jenny McCarthy. Noted immunologist. I mean, Playboy Bunny. Whatever. Same thing. I love Jenny McCarthy. I think she's hilarious. I think she was funny, but she's way out of her lane, and she's caused a lot of hardship too. But it wouldn't have happened without Andrew Wakefield. And so that's why we got to look at this motherfucker.
Okay.
Because he's still alive, and he's still, being an asshole. All right. See you next week, or in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah.